Hello and welcome back to the channel where once again it's time for another Sega Saturn review, with us taking a look at one of the Saturn's release titles today. I'm of course talking about Virtua Fighter, which came out originally in October of 1993 in the arcade, before getting a November 1994 release in Japan, a May 95 release in North America, and a July 95 release over here in the PAL region. Now, unless you're completely oblivious to video game history, you may well know that Virtua Fighter was the first ever 3D fighting game, and it remains one of the most important video games ever released. And if you're new to my series, what I do is I talk about games visually, in the sound department, how they play, content and lifespan, and of course whether they're still worth playing today, and if they are good enough to feature in my PAL or my worldwide Saturn top 10s. So once you hit the main menu, you'll see it's pretty primitive stuff. We've got arcade, versus, and options. Once you go into options, you've got a few things you can change: life gauge, match point, time limit, enemy level, continues, and you can do all of the sound and voice and music tests as well before checking the control pad configuration. Of course, it's got a simple 3-button layout of guard, punch, and kick. Once you head into the character selection screen, you'll see you've got 8 characters by default. We've got Akira, we've got Pi, we've got Lau, we've got Wolf, Jeffrey, Cage, Sarah, and last but not least, we have Jackie. So like always, I'm going to start with visuals first, and it's actually quite difficult to go back and talk about Virtua Fighter in this area without sounding quite negative. Now obviously it was originally released in the arcades in 1993 and it was very impressive. Obviously it was the first 3D fighting game when it came out, but it wasn't long before it was easily surpassed with games like Tekken and the Toshinden series coming out, and they obviously used texture mapped polygons that looked far more detailed and impressive. Now what we get with the Saturn port of the game is low polygon count character models with flat shaded polygons and pretty basic looking 2-dimensional backdrops, which leaves us with a very primitive looking game. The game's actually also fairly glitchy in areas, and the camera does struggle to keep up with the action and does seem rather erratic at times. It would probably be fair to say that if you compared this with all of the other 3D fighting games on the system, it is the least impressive looking 3D one out of all of them. Now, the basic level of presentation, I'd say, actually carries over into the menus and the character selection screen as well, and I think they would have probably benefited from some hand-drawn character images, certainly to give those fighters a little bit more personality. Now, thankfully, it's not all negative because we do have fantastically animated moves. I think they genuinely look spot on. And like all of the other Virtua Fighter games, even dating back to this one, they've got this realistic, solid looking moveset, and I genuinely think they look impressive. You also get consistent, at least to my eyes anyway, 30 frames per second, which was something a lot of the other early 3D games on the Saturn couldn't offer. Excellent! Now moving on to the sound effects and music next, and what the Virtua Fighter series has always done is sounded very good, and it's no exception, even dating back to the original game here. We've got fantastic in-battle sound effects. Even the voice samples are of a reasonable quality considering this was a release title, but of course the major strength is the fantastic soundtrack. It stands the test of time brilliantly. All of the tunes are memorable and of a very, very high quality. So what I will do is what I always do, give you some samples of the fantastic music on offer within Virtua Fighter. Now, moving on to the gameplay next, and the Virtua Fighter series has always been a series of games that rewards players for learning their characters' moves and the ways that they can counter all of the opponent's attacks. If you're looking for a game where you can button mash your way to success, this will not be a game for you. None of the games in the series work like this either. Yes, there are characters who can perform some pretty decent combos simply by mashing a combination of the punch and kick attacks, but a lot of them you will not get success in this way, and it involves practicing the moves, learning them, and really harnessing your skills to be successful at the game. Now, the 3-button interface may seem very primitive, but it works absolutely brilliantly to perform a wide variety of moves for the characters. In fact, there are actually over 700 moves within the original Virtua Fighter game, and that was one of the things that was highlighted when the game came out. And in terms of the level of difficulty, the game is by no means an easy game, even considering its age. You will undoubtedly run into certain fighters that cause you problems over and over again, even on the easiest of difficulty settings. And once you turn the difficulty settings up even more, it will definitely provide you a challenge in terms of the gameplay. So overall, in terms of gameplay, it's actually still a very good playing game even nowadays. So moving on to content and lifespan next, and if you've watched many of my other Saturn reviews, in particular the ports of all of the arcade games that the Saturn got, you will know that I've said a lot of the time content in these games was pretty lackluster and their overall replay value was fairly slim, and Virtua Fighter falls right in line with that because we simply have 8 characters, arcade mode, versus mode, and your option menu, and that is it to start with. You can unlock ranking mode, and you have one additional character in the form of Dural to unlock as well. Now, the main bulk of replay value really comes in terms of learning the character's movesets and trying to be able to beat the game on the hardest possible difficulties and getting the best rank you possibly can in ranking mode. Of course, when the game came out, there would have been a lot of replay value in terms of the versus battles, playing against your friends and keeping records, of course, of who can beat who. That really would have been where the replay value was, because there isn't a whole lot of content here. There's no storylines for any of the characters. There's no ending video sequences for each character when you complete the game either. So in terms of the game's actual content and lifespan, Virtua Fighter does perform quite weak here. It's probably the game's weakest area. So like always then, that leaves me with my 2 final questions. Is Virtua Fighter still worth playing nowadays? And does it potentially feature in our PAL or worldwide Sega Saturn top 10s? Now, I always find it interesting to go back to the beginning of a long-running series to see what the game began like and how it's progressed over the years. And you can definitely do that with Virtua Fighter and really appreciate how the series progressed in terms of quality. But in terms of whether it's actually worth playing Virtua Fighter nowadays, it isn't really. There isn't really a whole lot to come back and see, because the game got quickly supplanted by Virtua Fighter Remix and then the fantastic Virtua Fighter 2, meaning there isn't really any incentive at all to go back and play the original game. In terms of does it make our PAL or worldwide Saturn top 10s, it's impossible to do so, because the game simply doesn't have the content and the lifespan, or indeed the visual presentation either, to make those lists. Now, of course, these are just my thoughts and my thoughts alone, and I'm always interested in hearing other people's thoughts on the game from when it came out originally and how you think it stands up nowadays, and of course whether you agree or disagree with anything that I've said. So leave your comments down below in regards to all of that. And also, if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, consider doing so to keep up to date with all of my Saturn reviews as I continue to go through every single game that was released in the PAL region, plus a variety of other games as well. That is all for this week. Let me know your thoughts on Virtua Fighter down below, and like always, I'll be back in the near future with another review. Goodbye for now.